I'd like to call the August 11th Board of Adjustment meeting for the City of Bel Air Beach to order and ask that we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Patty, can you call the roll?
Board Member Marv Beam.
Here.
Board Member Carol Conry.
Present.
Board Member Fred Elia.
Present.
Board Member Tony Gatliff.
Present.
Board Member Jane Mason Goldman.
Present.
Chair Mike Kelly.
Present.
And Board Member David Gardella has not yet arrived, and Gerald Wisawati was unable to attend.
Thank you. I'd like to ask each of the board members, when you do speak, since these are new microphones for the city, get close to the microphone so that Patty can record everything that's being said. At the podium, the microphone's already turned on, so anybody that speaks up there will do that accordingly. We're actually going to go ahead as our first item of business tonight and elect a vice chairperson. Patty sent out a notice to everybody asking if anybody would be interested in serving as vice chairperson, and Jane Mason Goldman has volunteered to do so. She's expressed the interest, so at this point, I would like to ask if any board member would like to make a motion to appoint Jane Mason Goldman as vice chair. The motion.
Second.
By Mr. Gatliff and Carol Conry as your second. Patty, should we do a roll call vote, or you want to just do a vote up here, yes or no? With
what-
Marv here, do you want to just do a roll call?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
We'd like to ask that all that are in favor of Jane Mason Goldman reply by saying yes when Patty calls the roll.
Mr. Beam,
Yes.
Ms. Conry,
Yes.
Mr. Elia,
Yes.
Mr. Gatliff,
Yes.
Ms. Goldman,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you. Congratulations, Ms. Goldman, for your voluntary service that we hope to have to use whenever I'm not around.
Well, I have to walk in your shoes, so that's very nerve-wracking.
Training starts next Monday.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of our December 9th, 2021 Board of Adjustment training session. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Was that by Marv? Okay.
I'll second.
Thank you, Fred. All in favor of accepting the minutes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carry 6-0. Okay, at this time, I'm going to ask that anybody that's going to speak tonight actually stand up and be sworn in by our city clerk.
Would you raise your right hand, please?
Yeah, you can
Do you
do so.
solemnly declare or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in these proceedings is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I forgot to recognize the city engineer, Al Carrier.
Okay.
That he's present.
I was just going to, when I asked for the staff report, I was going to do so, but yeah, we are glad to have Al Carrier from Dual Associates here on behalf of the city as our civil engineer. Welcome, Al. Thank you for having me. Okay, I'm actually going to go ahead and follow the rules of procedure, even though we have them on our agenda for those who are in the audience. This is how we're going to handle this meeting tonight. I will actually read the variance request first. Al, on behalf of the city, will read the staff report. The applicant will then actually make a statement at the podium. We'll have open discussion regarding the variance request. go ahead at that point and go and vote on the 6 criteria questions that are in your packet. And then at the end of that, we will have a motion and a second for approval or denial in the form of a roll call vote. So at this point, even though we're down one member, we'll go ahead and ask, I'll read the variance request, and then Tony, at that point, you can go down and give your statement. This is consideration of variance request 22-01-2228 Donato Drive. Anthony Kevin Gatliff and Peggy Ann Gatliff are requesting a variance from section 10-172 regarding setbacks, height, and width for swimming pools, subsection G, that reads, the height of a swimming pool shall be no higher than 18 inches above the crown of the road. Any structural part of any permanently installed in-ground pool or spa shall not be built higher than 24 inches above the pool deck, including raised spas, raised pool beams, upper level decks, and raised waterfalls. Auxiliary deck-mounted equipment such as handrails, ladders, grab rails, diving boards, and slides shall not be subject to the height restrictions set forth in this section. This variance is to install a pool and spa 14 inches above the maximum height allowed by code. Tony? Thank you.
Good evening. So I have some prepared comments. I'm going to read verbatim. Public speaking isn't my forte, so I decided to write down my thoughts, and here we are. So the variance that we're asking for is the minimum difference between our patio and the 18 inches currently allowed by code. That difference is only 14 inches. Brief history of our home. Our home was built in '72. Other than the roof and AC, there were no changes to the land or the home prior to our ownership. We purchased the land and home in 2016. At that time, we had to replace an aging seawall. Looking ahead, we had a pool span built into the new seawall. We renovated a portion of the home in 2017, adding some square footage. We kept the grade the same. We didn't raise it, and our grade has remained at its present level since our home was originally built. We have 2 adjoining neighbors, one to our south and one to the north. The home to the south has a pool deck that is approximately 2 feet higher than our proposed pool deck. The home to the north has a pool deck that is approximately 6 inches to a foot higher than our proposed pool deck. Both of these were constructed prior to the current ordinance. I've provided some photos for you. You can kind of visualize and see what they look like. Our proposed pool deck will not create any flood danger to our neighbors, as their homes are higher in elevation. Our adjoining neighbors have reviewed our plans and have no objections. Letters from both are presented for your review, and that's also attached there. Looking around our neighborhood, there are numerous old homes with pools that come directly off their patio grade, many at a similar elevation to our home. Our older home, like others, presents a unique circumstance where coming directly off of the patio grade just makes common sense. We feel that we're being unfairly affected by a provision in our city's code that was poorly conceived. It punishes older homes that were built at a reasonable elevation. Again, take a look at the photos of the home in relation to our neighbors. Allowing the 14-inch minimum variance would pose no danger to either of our neighbors. It will make possible the most reasonable use of the land and our home, and to have a safe pool. A minimum of 14 inches. That's all we're asking for. Anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Patty, are there any letters at all, as Mr. Gatlin just mentioned, from anybody that you've received regarding this variance?
No, I did not receive any.
Okay, in Tony's packet that he just read from, there are letters, if you'd like me to give you these, from both neighbors.
Mr. Gatliff gave me a copy.
Okay. All right. So the neighbors to the north and the neighbors to the south have sent letters of approval for this variance. Is that correct, Tony?
That is good.
Okay. Are there any questions for Chris Arnold, who's here from Kelly Pools tonight from the board? Al, any questions whatsoever?
No questions.
Okay. Then at this point, I'll ask you, Al, as a civil engineer, to go ahead and read your letters on behalf of the city.
Good evening, I'm Al Carrier, I'm with Doolin Associates. We're an engineer of record for the city. We provide multiple services for the city, and I have been sworn in. We were asked to provide review services for the request for the construction of a pool at 22228 Donato Drive. Based on the review of the plans prepared by James Kynes, PE 33678, plans dated 12/31/20. We had to deny the plans because of adherence to the city code. City code is in Division 2 under swimming pools, Section 10-174, subset G. Subset G, the height of the swimming pool shall be no higher than 18 inches above the crown of the road. The crown of the road on the plan set was stated at elevation 5.3, and the request is to put the pool deck at elevation 7.8.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and read into the minutes a requirement that Tony and I have both had to fill out forms because we both have voting conflicts for this case tonight. It is an absolute necessity that Patty sent copies of all of these two forms to each of the board members in advance of this meeting. And it's requirement that anybody that has a conflict of interest cannot vote but must abstain from the vote. So this form, which is from the State of Florida Ethics Commission, is acknowledging that Anthony Kevin Gatliff and Michael Edward Kelly are both abstaining from the vote tonight as required, and we're reading this form into the record, and it will state part of the record with the city to state saying that we understand the law and we will not vote. At this point, we're going to move forward into the section that is our criteria of 6 questions that the applicant must receive a yes vote on. A yes vote from the 6, the variance will be approved. Any no votes of any of the 6, the variance is denied. If you want to use the worksheets, each of us have the variance request worksheets. Carol, you got yours?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Tony?
Yes.
Al, do you want to copy this?
I believe I have it.
Okay. I'll read each of the 6, and each of the board members will vote in a roll call fashion that Patty will call. Marv, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Okay. Okay, the Board of Adjustment shall find that the applicant, 1, demonstrated that special conditions or unique circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved, and which are not applicable to other similar structures or buildings in the same zone. A yes vote, the variance is approved. A no vote, the variance is denied. Patty?
Mr. Beam,
Yes.
Ms. Conry,
Yes?
Mr. Elia,
Yes.
Ms. Goldman.
Yes.
For the record, would you ask Tony and let him say he's abstaining, and myself?
And Mr. Gatliff,
I abstain from the vote.
Mr. Kelly,
I abstain from the vote.
thank you.
Okay, question number 2. has the applicant demonstrated that the variance requested is the minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure? Patty?
Mr. Beam?
Yes.
Ms. Conry?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Gatliff?
I abstain from the vote.
Ms. Goldman?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
I abstain. 5-0. 2 abstentions.
4-0.
4-0, 2 abstentions. Okay, let's move on to question number 3. Has the applicant demonstrated that granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this chapter? A yes vote, the variance will be approved. A no vote, the variance will be denied. Patty?
Mr. Beam?
Yes.
Ms. Conry?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Gatliff?
Abstain.
Ms. Goldman?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
I abstain. 4-0.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Approval 4, denial 0, and 2 abstentions. Number 4, has the applicant demonstrated that the variance requested does not change the use of the property from the use characteristic mandated for District 1 and District 2 in Section 30-51 and 94-252 and Article 4, Division 3 of this chapter? A yes vote, the variance will be approved. A no vote, the variance will be denied. Patty?
Mr. Beam?
Yes.
Ms. Conry?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Gatliff?
Abstain.
Ms. Goldman?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
I abstain. 4-0.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Number 5, is the applicant willing to comply fully with addition conditions and safeguards which the Board of Adjustment may prescribe, including but not limited to reasonable time limits within which the action for which a variance is required shall commence and/or be completed? A yes vote, the variance is approved. A no vote, the variance is denied. Patty?
Mr. Beam?
Yes.
Ms. Conry?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Gatliff?
I abstain.
Ms. Goldman?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
I abstain.
4-0 approved.
Thank you. Number 6, has the applicant demonstrated that the variance requested does not violate any provisions and requirements set forth in Chapter 62, which in our code book is utilities, and Chapter 74, which in our code book is floodplain management of the city code? A yes vote, the variance is approved. A no vote, the variance is denied. Patty?
Mr. Beam?
Yes.
Ms. Conry?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Gatliff?
I abstain. I abstain.
Ms. Goldman?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
I abstain.
Approved 4-0.
Thank you. At this point, I will ask for a motion from the board to either approve or deny, in that all 6 criteria got approval votes. Does anyone wish to make a motion to approve variance number 22-01?
So moved.
But
Second?
So moved, Mike.
Mr. Bean, thank you for the motion. Mr. Elliott, second. Carol, third. Okay. You want to go ahead and have us read the entire approval?
If you'd like
Okay,
to.
the motion's been made and approved and seconded. We'll do a roll call vote for said approval. Patty, if you'll call the roll.
Mr. Beam?
Aye.
Ms. Conry?
Aye.
Mr. Elliott? Mr. Gatliff,
I abstain.
Ms. Goldman,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
I abstain. Okay, by a vote of 4-0 with 2 abstentions, variance request 22-0 is approved. That's all we have on the formal agenda for this variance request, but if there's any open discussion that we would care to discuss or items to discuss, now would be the time. Tony, do you have any comments now that this is already passed?
No, well, I'm glad just glad to see it behind us and ready to move forward and build up.
Al, I think we'd like to give you a little bit of history here on this ordinance if we can, because there's been general discussion with the city manager and with staff and some elected officials that this ordinance should be reviewed for possible change. So we'd like to do a little bit of discussion if we could. Tony, as the applicant, has had to deal with this. Myself, as owner of Kelly Pools, and Chris from Kelly Pools can give you a little bit of information, and we think it would help. Because as this moves forward, the city council could put this in the form of a workshop, couldn't they, Patty?
Yes, sir.
Discuss the ordinance. Isn't that the procedure?
Yes, sir.
That is protocol. We'll tell you how this ordinance came about and what happened prior to 2014 when it passed, and see if you as our civil engineer would ultimately give us some opinions or some help related to this ordinance.
Certainly.
Chris, you want to come up and say anything about that, or you want me to explain it?
Either or.
Okay,
If you want.
sure.
When this was originally proposed, there was a lot of, from my understanding, because obviously I'm not a resident of the city, but a lot of the newer homes that were being built very high up above floodplain, they wanted to build their pools at that higher level. So a lot of these pools were being constructed were impeding views from the neighbors next door and creating water issues with drainage to the neighbor's property. So back then, whoever was involved with the city in rewriting that ordinance, they arbitrarily chose 18 inches. I don't know where that came from, but that really is a hindrance on a lot of the older houses like Mr. Gatliff's, because it would be impossible to build a pool at 18 inches above the ground of the road, because that pool would be below grade in a lot of instances. So there's really been nobody overseeing that through the years, so the contractors have kind of been putting on the forms what they need to put on there, and it's never really been checked either prior to construction or after construction. So there's probably going to be a lot more of these coming forward in the future, unless it's addressed and looked at by the council and city manager. Have anything?
Don't go away.
Okay.
Stay right there. There's houses even adjacent to Tony's home where new houses are under construction now that are a lot higher than his house is for your base elevation. We'll call the grade the floor level of the house, okay? So don't you think each of those pools that are coming forward would need to come before a board of adjustment, or the variance needs to be reviewed by council, which could happen, for a change? I will tell you, because I was directly involved in 2014, when the mayor at that time, who was a general contractor and a well-respected man in construction, had heard from various people that when some of these houses that were built at grade 4 or 5 feet above the neighbor's grade, the neighbors ended up seeing the back of a retaining wall that was excessive. And enough action took place to where the mayor instructed staff, and an ordinance, a change to this ordinance took place in September of 2014. I was present at the podium at the time. The civil engineer for the city was present at the time. We both disagreed with the 18 inches above grade. We wanted 24 or even 36 for reasonability. A compromise took place, and 18 inches was written into that ordinance. That's the history behind it. The fallout of it is now what's happened here. Fred, your house is even 3 feet above the crown of the road. We're saying to the city, what happens next? What would you, would you, on behalf of the city, prefer to go out when the applications come into the city for variance? Would you want someone from Dual Associates to go out and shoot grades out there to confirm yes or no on the applications? What do you think? This is just general discussion.
Well, generally, I think from a plan review standpoint, well, let me back up. We talked earlier about the 24 inches as a requirement for the finished floor of the house above the crown of the road.
Correct.
There seems to be some sort of disconnect, at least from the designer standpoint, that you now are, the pool can't be higher than 18 inches from the crown of the road. So if the house comes in, say it's 30 inches over the crown of the road, pool's deck's down at 18 inches, you got 4 steps to walk out the back here. Most people don't want that. Most people want to have one continuous living area. In doing that, though, raising the entire house and pool area, one of my major concerns is looking at drainage. So what happens, people just shed the water off the pool decks, and a lot of times if you have an older home that's adjacent, it usually takes the brunt of, the runoff. Because usually when people buy a piece of property to redevelop, they're going to raise the seawall. They want to get the house up as high as they can with the pool deck. And then a lot of times, and I don't see a provision in your code that requires that a drainage plan be provided at the time that the seawall is constructed and or a pool is constructed. So I think that might be something else that needs to be addressed in your code when you address the height of the pool deck. Provide some sort of drainage analysis to show that the water, after you're done construction, goes over the seawall if that's where it went originally, or a lot of times interior lots where there's not a seawall, that's a B-type graded lot where the water comes back to the street, and that you're not affecting the adjacent properties.
Some of the other beach municipalities do have that in their codes, and that is
Correct.
something.
Al's very familiar with Treasure Island. He's been a consultant for Treasure Island for years. You and I have been to meetings at the city of Treasure Island regarding the elevations of pools, because adjoining neighbors, like he just mentioned, are coming to the city and saying, this brand new house going next door to me is going to flood us out. And the meetings we've had were with seawall contractors, civil engineers, and pool contractors. This is a major issue up and down Balboa, not just our city. Tony's a victim of this ordinance, quite honestly. And the city, according to Lynn Reeves, when we met out in cities, out at Tony's house with Chris and myself, we asked them who checks it on behalf of the city, pre-application approval. And Lynn said nobody. We're going by what you said. Even your letter said, based on the plan from Kelly Pools, this is a violation. So our next step moving forward is to go to work session, if Mr. Gatliff and or others care to ask the city council to change the ordinance. A revision would be necessary, and your advice, Al, will be imperative. Because there's got to be a compromise. But just like you said, if we're 24 inches above the crown of the road to your garage floor, 6 inches, give or take, higher, so you're up 30 into the main floor, you're on the ground 2.5 feet right there. We did have, Patty, I'm not sure you would know this, and Kyle's not here to say yes or no. We did have for years, Al, a maximum height on a retaining wall around a swimming pool, around the deck, 4 feet. No higher in the city than 48 inches. There's retaining walls all over the city that are no higher than 4 feet. Because that, during the time that the ordinance was written with this, not the 18-inch maximum, but pools built at grade, that's how we solved the drainage issues. So, I mean, do you have one around your pool? Is there a wall behind your house? There's one around your pool, isn't there? Retaining wall on the back side?
My old falling apart pool, and I'm waiting for you.
Yes.
Kind of has retaining wall, I have a grade that goes up the back, because the seawall is the original seawall.
Right.
Like in Tony's case, when you build a new seawall, it's
Pull that closer. Just pull it closer.
when you build a new seawall, it's usually 18 inches or 2 feet higher than the original seawalls, right?
Right.
So when you do that, it changes your whole back grade.
Well, don't you think what we're talking about is modernizing this whole approach?
Yeah,
Because everything has changed and even the grade of the street has changed.
but why wasn't it,
From my-
why,
from my
they had a big, they went over all the ordinances like 5 years ago, right? Remember?
Yeah,
So it should have, nobody thought of addressing it then, but it should have been
But they
addressed
didn't
then.
have us.
That's true, but I mean, irregardless, they had a lot of good people, they should have been addressed.
right.
The
We
ordinance-
tried to.
All the ordinances.
Right, we tried to address that in the code revision committee, which I was on, you came to some of the meetings. You had to deal with those issues when you were getting your variance. Dave Gaddis did too, as a citizen before he was even elected. So it's got to change, Al, and it'll have to go to a work session first, Patty, if that's the procedure.
That, yes, sir, that is.
I also think that there has not been this building activity for years. So right now, we have 4 homes being built in my cul-de-sac on 22nd Street, 4. And it is chaos
They're all
there.
real high, they're not 18 inches, nothing but 18 inches above grade on that, those four.
But all of us would be working around the clock to review every variance based on what they're doing, right?
Yeah,
So I think we should think about modernizing, and I'm 100% in for doing it.
That's exactly you hit the nail on the head, Gene. Because Al, the biggest issues this Board of Adjustment has ever heard in the past has been pools, docks. Carol, help me out. What else have we done here?
It's a big issue.
And the plan isn't to have every new home that's coming
Have to get a variance.
have to get a variance. That's why we look at the bigger picture. And Tony and I discussed it with Lynn and Chris. Do we go for a variance on this? Collectively, it's his decision. Or do we do an ordinance change? And Lynn advised us it's easier to do a variance time-wise than it is to do an ordinance change. So would you help us if we go that route?
Certainly, yeah, whatever you guys need. I'll be more than happy to attend a meeting and give my input from a design standpoint and reviewer standpoint, so.
Because quite honestly, a lot of these pools are flying under the radar right now. Because the applications are taking place. Statements, if they're being made either by the homeowner or the pool contractor says we're no more than 18 inches above the grade, then the pools get built and they're out of the ground 3 feet.
Right.
And it's, look at Howard Drive. There's 2 monster houses going in at the end, or David, is that one at the end of Howard? I'm not sure.
It's one now currently under construction.
It's enormous. There's flanking vacant lots on both sides. Either our board's going to get a whole lot of variances, or we change the ordinance. And that's kind of where we're headed.
Yeah, it needs to be updated.
Definitely common sense, I would say, that we go.
But I have a question for Tony. Tony, so your house right now, currently, both your neighbors are above grade, higher than you. So engineering-wise, what do you do to prevent Tony's house currently from getting overloaded by water?
Well, the way our pool and our deck is designed, our deck doesn't go from lot line to lot
Like
line.
you get the grass there.
So we have our present grade on either side of the pool. So if there were any water flow from either neighbor over, it would flow out back and flow out.
What about your neighbors? He has the grass there too, even though he has a retaining wall. So that's what I was like, engineering.
Yeah,
Engineering
south,
wise.
John's house.
Yeah.
So you have to have some sort of graded
Like
section.
Al was saying, yeah, I think drainage needs to be addressed.
Yeah, that's the,
Whether it's a couple of those homes that went down there on Gulf Boulevard and Belle Isle, built, looks like 5 to 6 foot almost above the road. And the house right next to it has a retaining wall that's at least 6 foot, if not 7, that they're looking at right there.
Al, that happened, the one Tony's talking about happened in 2009. And the backlash was incredible, because they built the pool at grade, and the house was raised up 4 feet out of the ground.
Then you need a good definition of what grade is and at what time that the grade was actually established. Yeah, you guys are not unique. You know, Treasure Island has a code, in their code, they don't allow anything higher than 3 feet in someone's backyard. They establish grade at the seawall, because you're going through the same thing, where you get, somebody comes in, they build a pool, the pool's elevated, and then now you have to put a fence around it, right, to protect it from that. So now somebody that's sitting at their existing grade house next to it is now looking at essentially 7 or 8 feet of the side of the pool and fence, and then, you know, hedges. So I know every lot's different, every lot is unique, but to your guys' benefit, a lot of the lots out here are a lot higher, a lot meaning maybe a couple feet higher, but most of what I see down like Treasure Island and Madeira Beach. So you guys have a little bit of relief to work with, which helps tremendously. I did want to touch on, you kept saying retaining wall. Are you talking about return walls off of the seawall?
Perimeter walls around the outer deck of the pool.
Oh, okay.
4-foot-high walls, maximum in the city. I don't honestly know if it's still on the books, but it has been forever. When the county was doing plan review, you had to come in and show that you were building a maximum of a 4-foot-high wall on the outside of your pool. And the elevation of that pool had to be relative to that wall. So many of the homes, David, even like Pat Magovich's house right down here, that was built 5 or 6 feet out of the ground, she had to have a series of steps now coming out of the home down to the pool. Does yours have steps coming out to your pool? Stepping down your house? So you walk out on the same level. But a lot of these houses that, again, take 6 feet above grade, quote unquote, the actual ground, before the house established a new grade, 6 feet, 5 feet higher. Those houses, if you walk around the city, do have steps coming down 8 inches, 8 inches, 8 inches in order to have a maximum wall around that pool of 4 foot. There's violations on that all over the place too. And the house Tony just talked about on the corner of Bell Boulevard and Belle Isle Avenue, the people in the back are the ones that got slammed. And that had a direct effect on the ordinance change in 2014. 18 inches wasn't right. It's time to be corrected.
I'm curious, if you have a pool deck that's 3 or 4 feet high from an existing grade, then you guys are required to put railings around that pool deck?
If it's above,
If it's over 30
what is
inches?
it, 30 inches?
32 inches. I think.
32 inches.
You know, it's where we go next, and that's the big question.
So do we have a meeting?
This goes to council, doesn't it? Or do we talk to, does someone from council have to bring it to a discussion to go to a work session? Who establishes the agenda at a work session?
The city manager, so Mr. Kelly, you probably would want to talk to Mr. Riefler to get it on the agenda for a work session.
Okay. Does it need any kind of, to put the item on the agenda, does it need a council member's recommendation, or does it have to come from a council member?
No, it does not.
Okay. Well, is it the consensus of our Board of Adjustment that we'd like to see this ordinance go to work session, and we can give input? Yes.
Yes, I would agree.
100% by me.
Okay.
Yes.
Hey, Michael.
I was going to ask Marv, you out there?
All right, as far as any permit that's pulled in the city, I've had an experience recently. I think all the permits should be inspected by Mr. Carrier or a representative from the city before the permit is issued. Because, just to give you a little idea, I had to remove a block wall on my property, and the neighbors have been putting their soil up against that wall for the last 20-some years, and that wall has to come down, and now that property is 12 inches over my property. And they have a retaining wall that's there, and it's over the retaining wall because that seawall has been raised. So we've got all this soil and all that water now will spill over into my property. So I think all the permits that are issued in the city need a review before they're issued. Once they're applied for, and then somebody inspect them, inspect the ground, inspect what was going to be done, whether it's a fence or a driveway or anything, to make sure the drainage on these properties isn't going to be affected one way or the other, on either property.
Thank you, Marv. Al, are you having to do that at all now? Or do you just go by the architectural plans?
If there's any question, we'll go out and do a site visit. We do it for both Treasure Island and Madera Beach. But sometimes the plan doesn't always show you what's actually going on in the field. Sometimes the plan changes right during construction, and we'll be called out. So we do provide those services.
Marv, that's what you're talking about, right? A site visit?
Well, a site visit, correct. I mean, my permit was pulled to remove the wall, and the neighbors have a permit for a fence, and the fence is being put in, but the level of the land is not being addressed at this time. So there's going to be water spilling over on my property, if not ground, and there's an issue. But if it would have been inspected before, they would have found that there was an issue. But unfortunately now, things are going to move forward, the permits have been issued, and the problem will not be addressed.
Patty, so the recommendation is that you think I should go to the city manager and discuss this and hopefully put it on a work session?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other comments from any board members or anybody in the audience? If not, I want to thank Mr. Gardella, our newest member on the Board of Adjustment, for coming in. Because he's late, he has to buy drinks up the hill at Bonefish. At what time tomorrow?
I want to apologize to the board, the applicant, and Al. I was dealing with 2 AC repairs at the apartments I have, and time got away from me. I had to get the guys in these apartments with the tenants not home, so I apologize for keeping people waiting. It wasn't my intention.
We're glad to have you.
What a first meeting.
That's right.
We already did everything.
We're done.
Yeah, we're done.
Since we're done, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Beam, Mr. Elia, members of the board, thank you for an interesting meeting. Al, it was great to see you. Obviously, we will be seeing more of you, not only in Board of Adjustment cases, but in the issues involving us to make this ordinance be updated correctly with common sense. We stand adjourned.